Imagine you need to introduce a completely foreign, highly disruptive concept to a deeply fractionalized region. The map is carved up into dozens of distinct cultures, each with entirely different political structures, philosophical beliefs, and religious allegiances. If you enter those territories using a single, uniform pitch, the message deflects off local barriers, leading to rejection. Paul of Tarsus operated within this friction, adapting his rhetoric to match the specific intellectual terrain of the room. Paul avoided forcing his audiences to learn his vocabulary. Instead, he diagnosed the specific worldview of each city and translated his argument into their native concepts. Tracing his journey through Greece reveals the mechanics of his persuasion and shows how cultural fluency dictates whether a disruptive idea takes root or is ignored. The campaign began in the northern province of Macedonia. When Paul arrived in the city of Thessalonica, his first stop was the local Jewish synagogue. Here, he was dealing with an audience that shared his cultural background. He utilized a strategy of reasoning directly from shared scriptures, using the ancient authoritative texts the community already revered to construct his claims. The argument resonated with many, but it triggered a severe political panic among the local establishment. They organized a company of agitators and dragged Paul's associates before the city rulers, accusing them of subverting the decrees of Caesar by preaching a different king. To avoid these accusations of treason, Paul was sent away under the cover of night, escaping to the neighboring city of Berea. In Berea, he found a different reaction. This audience was more rigorous. They received the message readily, but spent every day searching those same ancient scriptures to verify Paul's claims. When an audience operates from the same foundational texts as the speaker, the most effective persuasive strategy is to anchor every argument in that shared authority. But that shared authority eventually vanished. After fleeing further south, Paul found himself isolated in Athens, a city saturated in religious architecture and thousands of pagan idols. He faced a critical problem. The text-based arguments he used in the north were useless here. You cannot quote ancient scriptures to an audience that does not recognize them as an authority. He ran into immediate friction with the city's intellectual elite. Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him in the market and mocked him, dismissing his foreign message as the work of a babbler pushing strange gods. Without a foundation of shared cultural authority, his previously successful communication strategy was neutralized. To descend his concepts, they brought Paul to the Areopagus, or Mars Hill, the peak of the Greek intellectual and judicial world. Standing before this skeptical crowd, Paul abandoned his scriptural approach entirely. Instead, he used a local artifact he had noticed while walking through the city, an altar inscribed to the unknown God. He used their own monument as his rhetorical hook. He pivoted to natural theology, arguing that a creator who made the entire world is too vast to dwell in human-made temples, a concept that appealed to their own philosophical logic. Then he changed his evidentiary base. To validate these foreign theological claims, he bypassed his own scriptures and instead quoted from their own respected poets, reminding the Athenians of the line, "For we are also his offspring." By turning their own literature rhetoric into supporting evidence, Paul reverse-engineered the cultural framework of his skeptics to gain an intellectual foothold. The results of this adaptation were immediate. While some in the crowd mocked the idea of a resurrection, key figures like Dionysius the Areopagite were successfully convinced by the argument. Paul never altered the core data of his message. He simply used the audience's own academic and cultural tools to deliver it. The shift at the Areopagus suggests that spreading a revolutionary idea requires an intense level of cultural empathy. A message only gains traction once it is translated into the audience's existing framework. Persuasion involves mastering an audience's specific vocabulary and identifying the gaps in their walls, learning to speak to their unknown gods on their own terms.